Hello, everybody, and welcome to Inspire Me Forward. My name is Linda Watson. I am your host today, and I would like to welcome my guest, Shayla Anderson, and her episode, Her Inner Dawning. I absolutely love that title, Shayla. That is, I think, one of our best titles. It's fabulous. So, Shayla, I'm just going to give you a minute to introduce yourself.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Shayla Anderson. Most everybody calls me Shayla, but there are a select few that call me Shay for short. I am originally from Charles County, Maryland, but I currently reside in South Carolina, where I've been for almost 10 years. I came here for college and loved it, stuck around. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we look forward to getting to know you better, Shayla, as we go along. But I wanted to start with a little story because that's what we're about, is sharing stories here. But I wanted to share you a little story about something that happened to me the other day. My daughter's birthday just happened, and I went to a house to pick up some cupcakes, a private baker in the community. And I went in Sunday morning to pick up some cupcakes. And when she went off to get the cupcakes, there were two young little boys that came to the door and started telling me a story. They were telling me about how they were going to go to the fire station. They were going to have breakfast. They were going to see fire trucks. And we got into this back and forth of all those fire trucks. And as I walked away, I was really struck, like, when do we stop telling stories like that? They were so excited. They didn't worry if I wanted to hear their story or not. They had no qualms about telling me all about this. We all had smiles on our faces, the vibrancy in their and the excitement in their voices. And it just really got me thinking about, when do we stop telling our stories? And when do we do it because our voice, somebody said our story didn't have value, or not to tell our story? I find myself still telling maybe a story to somebody, then walking down the street and we're talking, and then walking away going, oh, maybe I shouldn't have told that, like second guessing myself on it still. And then, I tell many stories about my dogs. I'm not sure if people want to hear or not. I still tell them. So yeah, it just really struck me. And I will always think of cupcakes, fire trucks, and this beauty of these children just saying, and we're going to do this, and we're going to go here. And the excitement on their faces was just absolutely beautiful. So with that, we're going to jump into some story. So, Kayla, I'm just going to jump into our first question here. I'd love for you to tell us one time when you were the recipient of an act of kindness, like be a random or not, but when were you the recipient of an act of kindness?
Totally random. It happened a couple of weeks ago, and I honestly think about it at least a couple of times a week. I was going to a local coffee shop downtown just before like doing some work, and I've never been inside the actual building. They have like a little mobile truck where they'll go around and set up shop different places in the community. And I've never really talked to or like met any of the workers directly or the staff or the owners, anything. So I was walking in the shop and there were two men leaving. And then as soon as I walked through the door, there was another guy who I didn't know at the time. And he said, we were just talking about you. And that freaks me out because stranger danger, number one. Number two, like I'm very aware, and it is pretty much a small town. So there's not many people that I don't know or have some awareness of, you know? And so I just kind of gave a little puzzling look and was like, okay, like hopefully it was something good, you know? And he just went on, long story short, to tell me that he had seen a Facebook post recently of a job opportunity that I was given. And he went on to say that I was doing good things and just so many nice complimentary statements. And I guess I was taken aback because usually when any guy approaches or says something, you know, usually it has something to do with my physical appearance. And I actually hate those. Not hate, I do like, but I don't always want those compliments, you know? So for someone who I never met, didn't even know his name, you know, we did talk further. So I did get to know his name and we introduced ourselves and talked further. But for him to just say those kind things, I wasn't sure what to do with myself. you
Wow.
know,
Yeah.
totally unexpected and definitely blew me away.
How is that? You say you think about daily. How has it settled with you?
It just makes me smile from time to
Yeah,
time, like I feel like our world used to be like that, but it's not anymore. And so little glimpses and glimmers that we can get every now and again, I will happily take and soak in.
absolutely. Actually, hold it close to your heart, eh? Wow.
Hmm.
Beautiful,
For
beautiful.
sure.
I think the as you say, that some things we've lost. I think we've lost that art of receiving to a degree, and we have those things that come in. Oh, you can't receive this, or what about that? You were talking about, like, something of physical appearance, and comments and compliments, and like how do we receive? And it's that could be a whole other uh
Hmm.
session, but yeah, that art of receiving with grace. So actually, thank you for sharing that. That's and kudos to you for doing such great work. That's awesome.
Thank you.
So something I've found is what I call a through line, meaning they're consistent in all of 19 interviews we've had so far on this, is these touchstones, these moments or these things in childhood that we had that we perhaps lost and are slowly acquiring back. For me, it was a moment of dancing with at a school. My mother took a group of us, and I'm sure there were others came. And I remember dancing in a classroom with silk scarves, with an abandon that was just like not a care in the world. And it was this feeling of freedom. And I always go back. That's a touchstone for me. It's something that I remember, and I consistently remember, like, when did I stop dancing? And when did I stop twirling and moving my arms around and feeling that freedom? So my question to you is, what maybe was a touchstone for you?
For me, I'd have to say creative expression. And that has kind of evolved over time, like when you're kids, we draw little stick figures, we doodle, that kind of stuff. A few of my family members had very artistic qualities and traits, and I think I was pretty blessed and acquired some of that as well. I've never really taken classes like art classes, writing classes, none of that, but I always found pleasure and joy in bringing pen to paper, but I guess now finger to phone or whatever technological device. Um, it's something that I haven't ever really truly lost, but I definitely like put it to the wayside a couple of years ago, just in the busyness of everyday life. And so I've recently just started to pick that up and not necessarily writing things because I am a gift giver. Like I love gifting things and telling people
Mm,
things about them that I enjoy. So not so much that aspect, but just writing with no purpose or expectation, just letting it flow.
nice.
Um, yeah,
So
finding that joy
writing's your
again.
your writing's your creative expression of choice per se.
Yes, I like words.
Awesome. Awesome. A book in your future?
Everyone says so. Maybe.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Um, so I'm gonna give you the floor for a bit. Um, to share maybe sometimes, I know you and I have talked, as with everybody, we talk a little bit beforehand, but I think in all of our lives, we are, for however it happens, our voices are tamed. Our voices are diminished. Our voices are told to don't talk or don't say that. So, and then I think a good part of our life is finding that voice again, and finding that expression of that voice again. So I would love for you to take some time. I will support you, however, and take as long as you need. And yeah, what share with us how your voice has journeyed in life so far.
Okay. Thinking back to childhood, I really can't remember any like prominent experiences that made me feel like my voice was diminished or hushed. I grew up a typical good girl per se. Didn't really get into much trouble. I'd say around the time where anybody tries to start figuring out who they are, middle school age, is when I started to feel like I was different in a lot of ways from other people. but I still liked to stay in the background. And then if I ever did find myself wanting to speak up, I would either hesitate or talk myself out of it, just so many cases like that. And before I like fast forward to, I guess, present Shayla, I do work in a helping field. I work with young adults with disabilities. I've taught in the classroom for a couple of years. And so it's so interesting for me to think about how I can so easily speak up and advocate for them when they need it, whether they are students that are nonverbal or that can't express so freely as we have the opportunity and the ability to. So I think it's so interesting that I have no problem, no reservations doing that. But when it comes to me, I definitely like to take the back seat. I really didn't start working with that population until I was in high school, just doing different volunteer experiences. Um, so I think that in a way, speaking up for them and being an advocate has also given me confidence to speak up for myself, because if I were in their shoes, I wouldn't have the opportunity to. And I don't take that for granted, or I try not to take that for granted. It's so easy to stay silent because it's easy, at least it is for me. But it's not really ever gotten me far. So I guess that leads me to where I am now. I think in my young adult years, like once I made it through high school, when I left Maryland and moved to South Carolina for college, that is when I truly had the opportunity to figure out who I was, what I wanted out of life, and what that was going to look like. And it has changed over the past couple of years, but just being away from everything I had ever known, what I grew up around, I was able to figure out me and me solely without the input of everybody else being constantly thrown at me. So I think I'm just going to focus on a majority of what has happened in my late teens and to my 20s now. I'm 28. I was always a person in all through school, K through 12 and college, that was involved with extracurriculars. So student government, sports, I was team captain, senior captain. I've been like president of student council. I've served on sorority board in college, like lots of leadership roles, which is also funny and ironic because even still, not that I was made to serve in those positions, but people saw stuff in me that brought that out in me. But still, I had that self-doubt and that self-questioning that always served as a hindrance in actually speaking when I had the chance in whatever the situation might have been. So it's funny to look back now because I'm like, gosh, like, why did I do that? Definitely learned a lot from those experiences. And I was able to, give speeches and stuff, but that was very structured and planned. Like I wrote out a template, like it was basically just reading, which is so much easier than going for the free flow, and just legging it all out on the table. So fast forward to post college, I accepted my first job as a teacher, and I won't go into the specifics of any of the stories to follow just because while I am appreciative of those experiences, they were very raw and tender, and I don't want to, you know, uh, shine anybody in a negative light because we're all human, we're all imperfect. There were just instances my first year of teaching where I was the lead teacher of the classroom. I was the head, I had 13 students in my classroom and 6 adults that served as paraprofessionals or aides. And it was my first year. Like I'm kind of going in blind, like, yeah, I've learned a lot of stuff in college, but you don't really know it until you live it. So that was already not a negative, but a challenge. I never wanted to end up in the classroom. I did not want to teach. I truly only did it because a job that I was hoping opened up did not. And why go get that degree if I'm not going to use it? So it was just the next best thing. And I'm so glad that I did that. I loved my students. I just found in advocating and speaking up for them in ways that I saw fit didn't align with everybody else's viewpoints. A lot of the people that I worked with, not just in that job, but ones to follow, have been in those jobs for decades, so who's this newbie coming in thinking that she can just say and do whatever, well, that newbie is somebody that has just spent years going to school learning about this field and getting this degree and certification, you know. There was just one instant where there was a student who had lost a parent. That individual had autism. He was very limited with his verbal skills. And as we mostly all know, students and people with autism do not comprehend things the same way that we do. So, everyday things. So, to have a loss and not know what to do with that, he started to display behaviors. And in the special education world, if a student displays behaviors, you do have to report it. And just like typical students, they can get removed from the classroom, they can get suspended from school, what have you. However, they can't be suspended for more than 10 consecutive days without having a manifestation determination meeting, which tells that their behavior is a result of their disability. So, long story short, we had gone on several field trips spring semester, and these behaviors just started increasing and increasing. And we were trying to collaborate with the IEP team to figure out who could come in and offer support for him, just because my background is not in psychology and therapy. Like, I truly do not know how to help him outside of the scope that I've been trained, you know? So, after several rounds and instances of field trips of having him display those behaviors, after reporting it, after having him removed from the classroom for 2 to 3 days at a time, there was one day where we went on a field trip and he started to escalate a little bit. Nothing ever came of it. We were 45 minutes away from school. I had already texted his new guardian saying, "Hey, I need you to be on standby. This is happening. Just beware." Well, we made it perfectly fine. The 45-minute bus ride back to school, you know? So, while I did note what had happened for my records, I did not submit a formal incident report, you know, and it was questioned by several people. You know, I gave my reasoning, and several times that day, the next morning, and still someone went to my administrator and said that I did not report an incident that needed to be reported. And that was like the final straw for me. It had been such a long year already. I still had several months of the school year left, you know, but like, I worked hard to get my students where they were. You know, I don't just sit and twiddle my fingers. Like, I don't just make rash decisions. So I contemplated what to do. And he did not need to be removed from school another day. You know, he needed the autism consultant to come into our classroom, observe, and offer support, which was not happening because he was always removed. Um, and so I'm not like a big reactor. I got called into the administrator's office, bit my tongue all day. The whole hour drive home from work, I just cried and cried and cried. I just felt like not only was what I said like misunderstood, devalued, what have you, that was like a big trust move, you know? Like, these parents trust me, teachers in the school trust me, administrators trust me. I trust me in this moment in making the call that I just did. And so that was a big hit because it was my first year teaching and I didn't want to be there. So that was like the first time when I noticed that while I had a voice and I was using it, it just was not received well, you know? And so I didn't want to stay in that role. And I actually ended up not staying in that role, not because of that particular incident, but there were just other things on the horizon that I thought would serve me best, or serve me better. So as much as I wanted to stay for the kids, I knew that I wasn't happy in the classroom. So I had to make the choice to move on so it wasn't a disservice to them. And I mean, I got an apology, but sorry is just a sorry. Like, there wasn't really much action behind that sorry, you know, and that was a major circumstance for him. Like, it wasn't like, I don't know, loss is huge. Loss is huge for us. So I can only imagine the magnitude of it for him, knowing that he doesn't understand things the way that we do, and his brain doesn't process things the way that ours does, you know? So that leads me to like the next biggest thing where I felt like my voice was diminished. All through, not all through undergrad, but all through grad school, I used to take a group of college students with disabilities to a local barn where they would go and learn how to do like farm chores. You know, they'd groom the horses, a lot of functional tasks, just to get them exposed, but to also get volunteer experience. And that was the best thing since sliced bread. It was so fun. I loved it so much that when I wasn't with the students, I wanted to go on my own. And so I did. I started volunteering. I was surrounded by people that I thought I needed to be around, but it turns out I just wanted to be around them. And this is me learning this like as of last year, 2 years ago.
Mhm.
Um, it was just like such a positive environment at the time. I felt like it was edifying to me, like it was building me up. One key aspect they always focused on was using your voice. And at that point, that was before I started teaching when I started volunteering. So I didn't even know I had a voice until I started, working on the things to figure it out. And that was the one place where I felt like I was figuring it out and it was making sense. Fast forward a couple of years, my dream, although my degree is in special education, my dream was to always work with dolphins. So after I taught in Georgetown, South Carolina, my first year, I ended up going to Florida for an internship at a place that offered dolphin assisted therapy to clients with special needs from all over the world. And that was the actual dream. So after that, I was kind of like, I'm wide open, like I'll do whatever. So around that time, I had applied for a couple of jobs, which that could be a whole different story. Ended up getting a call to work at this barn, and I accepted just because I knew that I could excel in the special education field.
Mm.
It was something that I could always fall back on. However, I've also always loved animals, and I've never really gotten a chance to pursue something in that area. So I really didn't think twice about it because I knew how much I loved volunteering and how much that experience meant to me and how much those people meant to me. And when I was in Florida, that was the year that COVID hit. So I did stay teaching there for a year too. COVID hit, we went virtual. That's when I moved back to South Carolina. And long story short, I was there as an employee for a year and a half. And there was just a situation where things are being said about someone, but not to a someone, to that someone. And I sat and listened and tried to offer, I hear what you're saying. However, I do not agree, and that was not received well either. So eventually I spoke up to the person, but also on behalf of that person. And that caused one of the biggest spirals I have ever witnessed in my
Mm.
life.
Wow.
I was told that I was betraying someone, and it just ended up being a way bigger ordeal than I had ever envisioned or bargained for. Like that is not what I signed up for. And so, in moments where I felt like I'm doing exactly what you taught me to do, what you told me to do,
Mm.
that here I am being belittled and spoken down to and griped at. Like this is not what I signed up for. And so I really don't feel the need to go into details just because
No.
that whole picture is like decent enough. And so I had to make a choice to leave that job. Didn't know what I was going to do after that because it wasn't expected. But again, just another instance where I felt like I'm using my voice, and here it is again, misunderstood, devalued, not
Mhm.
heard. Um, and I feel like in both of those cases and in many other cases in my life, a lot of it has to do with control and people wanting certain control over situations or over certain people. And I just was not obliging. So
Yeah.
here we are. Here we are today. I recently have encountered another situation where I have used my voice and it did not end well. So I have decided that I'm going to go silent and not necessarily, I'm not going to use my voice, but I've always been an observer and I'm going to do a lot more observing and just sitting and thinking and feeling and letting that guide future interactions and I guess relationships because
Mm.
all of these instances have centered around relationships.
Mhm.
Um,
Mm. Interesting.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for sharing those first. And I think you bring up
You're
some
welcome.
really interesting points and spaces of sharing voices that I didn't even myself think of. Like they weren't, it wasn't sort of in here. So, but you talked about, and I think you talked about like trust and support and in using our voice, that trust and support are so important. And when we don't get those, then that affects that. Is that, I'd love for you to, sort of to maybe take this outside of sort of your story and just talk about it a bit in a broader sense of using our voice, advocating trust and support. We don't get that. What's your
Yeah, so I guess if we can jump ahead a little bit, that takes me to the little quote that you asked us to,
Yeah.
your participants to share. And I hope that I have it written down correctly, and if not, you can correct me later. But basically, it was saying that my words bear weight, and that weight isn't carried or held by everyone with the same level of regard. So I've come to discern who I can share my authentic voice with, and it matters to the point of felt safety. Um, I'm like a big thinker and a big feeler, and I'm not perfect at it. Like it's something that I'm still working on. Um, but when I go to speak to someone, whether it's something as simple as a like, "Hey, thinking of you," or if I'm going and telling a deep life story, how it's received, what their response is, that helps let me know if it's someone that I can trust with my words, whether it's simple as, "Hey, I'm thinking of you," or a deep life story. I think that we are made for connection and like we want to share things with people, but not everything is meant to be shared with everybody. And I have come to learn that in my personal experiences and professional, that that's just not the way that the world works. So I think that while we all should feel confident in using our voices and sharing things with other people, there has to come a time when you take a step back and realize that the value of your words will shift if you share things with the wrong people. And the validation and the support that you're needing might not come across in the way that it's intended to or that you need it to. Um, that's what comes to
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah.
That.
It's almost, it's like the word boundaries comes up, but I'm not sure. Maybe that's just maybe that's the wrong word, but just these lines. And like
Yeah.
I love how you talk about felt safety. And there's these lines, and as we shift into feel like seeing that, like I absolutely love your quote. And as we sink into that quote, it's how do we feel felt, what is that felt safety for us? And how do we, you know what, I'm not feeling it here, so I'm not going to share here. And how do we,
Mm-hmm.
I I guess maybe it's just through life experiences. I'd love to know, like, how do we get to that point? Like,
Yeah.
we feel that.
I think it's easy for me because I am a feeler. Like it's just if it is somebody that's trusting and I feel safe, it's I guess it shows up as peace or clarity versus confusion and chaos and unsettledness.
Yeah.
It's really hard to speak to everybody because I know it'll all impact us and show up in our lives different ways. But I think for me, felt safety is knowing that no matter what I say, it's held with confidence or it's kept with confidence. It's held with safety and love and kindness and compassion without judgment,
Mhm.
without belittlement, and without question, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I love how you say held. That to me, that there's there's something in that word held, and to
Yeah.
have your words held is I think that says it for me. It says it all. You know, when somebody can take my words and hold them
Mm-hmm.
with that confidence, then that's that safety. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, yeah, that's that quote is just so powerful. That's just, I'm glad you are. Thank you for articulating it in such a beautiful way that I think many of us now understand and can see that maybe in our
Mm-hmm.
lives and say, oh, okay, yeah, this is where this is, and just to be able to have that awareness of it is
Absolutely.
beautiful. So what maybe is a catalyst for you to share? I from what you've spoken of here, as far as um, advocating, you've spoken a lot of advocating, but what is a catalyst for you, or maybe in the past would have been a catalyst for you to share your voice, be that a creative voice, like your picture behind you and I were talking about, although that one's not yours, it reminds me of those beautiful pictures that you take, and those almost maybe a catalyst. Like what inspires you to share your voice?
I'd say knowing that, yes, while verbal expression is important, a catalyst could also be like my character. the way that I live, the things that I share, the acts of service that I perform. I once came across another young lady named Shayla. We went to college together. We were in the same sorority and we were talking. This is a couple years ago, so after we graduated college. And I remember us talking about social media. And I've always felt like, okay, if my verbal voice and expression isn't being heard, nobody's going to read what I write. Like I'm not a big social media influencer. I don't have tons of followers. And she said, Shayla, that doesn't matter. Like whoever needs to see what you have to say or wants to need or needs to read what you have to type, like they will come across it. And that literally was a game changer for me. And so when COVID hit, I actually started a page for all the sunrises and sunsets that I chase. And sometimes I share inspirational quotes, sometimes I don't. It just depends. But just knowing that that can be a beacon of light and hope for somebody else, that's just the way that I try to use my silent voice too. Showing up in ways that are atypical, I think is where a lot of people get met and where people feel held and supported. So for me, I do love words. I love quotes. I love Googling quotes and saving them for later. So a lot of the posts that I share, whether it's personal ones or about sunrises, about the work that I do, about passions, horses, animals, whatever, I just feel like people that need to see it, they come across it when they're supposed to. And I know that to be true because it happens to me all the time. Or else if I saw quotes, when I see quotes and I feel the things that I do and think the things that I do, it is literally the exact same thing I want to ensue out in the world and for other people to engage with. So I think a catalyst is just knowing that it's more than just your voice that speaks to people.
Yes, absolutely. You said sunset chaser. I have a dear friend that we both take pictures of sunsets, and she lives on the West Coast in the mountains, and so her sunsets always top mine. But we jokingly call ourselves sunset chasers. So I love how you say that. So, and what is it in a sunset or a sunrise? What is it in that for you, maybe? Like I always think of it. What is it that draws people to them?
Well, that's kind of where the title came from, her inner dawning. So I am more of a sunrise person than sunset, only because where I live, sunrise happens on the beach, and I literally thrive on watching the ball of the sun peek over the horizon. I can chase the sunset, and I do, but I live on the countryside of town, and so I follow back roads, and it just is hidden behind the trees and fields and stuff like that. So watching the whole sun come up over the horizon is just it's indescribable, and I feel super small when I do it, even when I'm surrounded by other people that are walking along the shoreline. And so that's kind of where the title came from. When I sit and I watch the sunrise, I don't have to talk. I can be by myself and be perfectly fine. And just knowing that there's a fresh start every day, a new beginning. It's the same for me. I might not use my voice today, but tomorrow's another day. Maybe I can try then. I don't know. It's kind of indescribable. I feel like it's hard to pinpoint one particular thing about the sunrise, but like the colors, all of it. I will show up an hour early when it's still pitch black dark out because I want to see the first like burst of color. And that's just not something you can paint.
Well, and it's interesting that you've said that, and what's really getting me here is we're talking about voice, but then we're talking about something that is indescribable and really in the moment you can't articulate it, so there is no voice in it, yet it's everything. That's like
mind-blowing.
so mind-blowing there. Yeah, maybe, yeah, I didn't even know what to say to that one. That's amazing. Okay, I want to go back to something here. Sorry, I want to go back to something
Okay.
that I jotted out. You talked about doing speeches and things like that they were mapped out. Right. I'm going to take us out of the sunrise moment for a second, but
Okay.
to sit in it. So I'm just going to jump. But you talked about speeches, how they were easier because they were, they were sort of set down. whereas speak maybe from the heart, as how I would say it, is harder. Why do you think that is, for yourself or for in general? But
I think for me, I am such a planner. Like I have a calendar planner, physical planner that I use, but I also use my phone calendar. And I'm like a very much stick to your schedule type person with a little bit of spontaneous maybe. And so speeches were just easy because we got to practice, everything I need is right in front of me. When I'm thrown for a loop and put in situations like I described earlier, I don't even know what to say. Like, I don't even know what just happened. Like, is this really happening? Is this a dream? So I think I like it just because I'm a planner and I'm a perfectionist. Like, I like things to a T. Speaking from the heart in moments like that, because I'm not a reactor, I almost just feel speechless and like I don't even know what to say, and I kind of shut down. I guess that's the word that I was looking for. I kind of shut down when things don't go how I expect, or when I'm upset, when I'm mad, when I'm angry, I just shut down. And so speeches are easier. I will say when it comes to like speaking from the heart, that is one way I do like to write. So sometimes speaking from the heart for me is I might not say something right now, but I might go type it out later and then bring it back up if I feel like it'll come across better from me to you.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, yeah. Writing from the heart is, yeah. That's when I write. That's the only place I can write from. If I feel I'm writing
Mm-hmm.
from the head, it just doesn't feel.
Mm-hmm. I think too, not just for me, but probably for a lot of us, speaking from the heart is harder too because when you're feeling a certain emotion in the moment, that typically is what causes bigger reactions and when people say things that they regret. So when you have time to think about what you want to say, how it's going to come across, the audience that you're speaking to,
Mhm.
you're kind of mapping yourself and setting yourself up for success.
Yeah,
Whereas speaking from the heart may not always go that smooth.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. That's I've for myself, I've found over the years it's taken me to learn many things and many ways of saying things, so I can speak from the heart. But when you come up against questioning and those pushbacks from it, it's taken me years to just find the ways of going, well, that's an interesting way of thinking about it, and then just finding those ways of opening up those conversations or closing
Mhm.
those conversations. So I totally hear what you're saying with the, if it's scripted, it's a little formulated, and it's a little, okay, this is where it's going to go.
Mhm. Mhm.
Exactly. Um, we talked a bit before, but I heard something today, and I thought it was the best, a beautiful question. So I'm going to ask you is, for me, I've been thinking all day about it, and I think I have my answer. But what was the bravest thing you ever said? I just, yeah.
It's funny because I couldn't think of anything earlier, and right now the first thing that comes to mind and the tip of my tongue is no.
Hmm.
No is the bravest thing I've ever said.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Nice.
there's like lots of layers to that, but I'm a yeser. I'm a people pleaser. I
Uh,
want to do it all, be it all.
yeah,
And so saying no is,
it's pretty brave.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. There's
pretty brave.
there's lots of reactions that might come out of that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So thinking for everybody here is answering that. For me, it was, as I said to you earlier, for me, it was I love you. It was I
Mhm.
love you to a parent that never said it, that displayed it, but from a generation of parents that just didn't say the words, to actually share that word, not knowing how it would be received. Those words, I love you, was terrifying to say, because you just didn't know where it would go. So thank you for answering that one. It was sort of throwing in there, but I just heard it earlier and I thought, oh, that's such a beautiful question. So can we talk about like that inner dawning that you spoke of, and you spoke of your inspiration for that. But you in the, in our preview for you, and then that flyer, you talked about being inspired to use your voice. Well, you realized it wasn't always the outward expression that settled the matter.
Mhm.
Can we delve into that a bit, or can you speak to that a bit?
Yeah. So much like the examples that I gave earlier, even though I did speak up and use my voice, it didn't solve anything. I left hurt, confused. My students still got suspended or whatever, still had to quit that job with the people that I thought I wanted to be with or needed to be with. Um, and so I've decided, actually, as of today, that I am going to go silent, and going silent is not necessarily a bad thing. And when I say I'm going silent, it means that I'm going inward. And it might mean that instead of me being the person that reaches out all the time, which is somebody that I am and I do enjoy doing, I can't do that anymore, because then I'm putting somebody else before me. And that has not gotten me anywhere either. And I want to be confident and rest assured in the voice that I have, whether it's me using it verbally or letting my life, my actions, my character speak for itself. I think in a lot of those examples that I gave earlier as well, that because I felt misunderstood, I let that like self-deprecating aspect kind of keep me from understanding myself, and like even acknowledging the fact that I might not even understand and know myself. And so I'm kind of going back to the basics and wanting to know everything about me, like the ins, the outs, the triggers, the things that I enjoy, don't enjoy. I want to be a force in this world, not one that is like dominant and taking over, obviously, but you know, if there's something in me that other people need to hear or deserve to hear, I want it to come out, and I need to figure out how to make that happen. So I think for me, going inward is more so a matter of listening to my voice, and uh, I don't know how I want to say it. Like there's just so many like layers and depths to it. It's almost like declarations over myself, instead of seeking external validation from other people, from other things, giving it to myself, which I have not allowed myself to do previously. Um,
I
so
love it.
yeah, I wanna feel safe, not just with other people, like other people that I share my words with, but I want to feel safe within myself too.
Yeah.
And that has been a challenge because I don't know how to sit with myself and be okay with it. Um,
Mm.
so that's
It
that's where
almost
it
sounds
comes
like a
from.
self-exploration. It's like a journey of
Yes,
self-exploration. So then
for
that brings me
sure.
right into a word I just wrote down. You talked that you've been involved with horses, and Kim Hallen is here, and I know you guys spend time together with the horses. So tell us, like, what do they do for you in this, Matt? Like that sort of sounds like we're segueing perfectly into that, but how do they help with that?
Yes. So speaking back to the experiences, both of them actually, when I was going into teaching and when I was volunteering at the old barn, there was a horse. And I will have to send you a picture later for sure to share with everybody. Her name was Pearl. And oh my goodness, it was kind of cool, but also kind of eye opening and kind of challenging and kind of breathtaking and beautiful all at once. I looked at Pearl, didn't even know her, had never met the horse before. I looked at her from afar one day and just said, "Oh my gosh, like who is that horse? I need to know her. She's
Mm.
beautiful." And I hate saying that because I mentioned earlier, I don't necessarily prefer the compliments on my physical appearance. And I don't know if she knows what those words mean, but it wasn't until I started hanging around her and getting to know her. She, of course, became my heart horse, that I learned about me and the fact that I did have a voice, and I had to use it with her because we were
Mm.
working at a barn that used a lot of like natural lifemanship techniques and principles. And so it was all about relationship building, offering choice, but also asking for what you need. And there came a time where we had to like play with pressure, like figure out what worked, what didn't work. And
Mm.
it was just so fun. But that was when I realized that I had a voice and it did deserve to be heard, because her presence in my life and my relationship with her was that important to me. Like I wanted it to happen,
Mm.
not in a forceful way, but I had a feeling, like when I just looked into her eyes, like I knew that there was more, and she hadn't really trusted anybody before. She arrived at the farm not long before I started. And so it was just cool because, I mean, I wonder how often she felt misunderstood. She was a bigger horse. Not saying she had bad behaviors, but she did things that some people didn't prefer, but she didn't do those things with me, you know? So it was just really cool over the years getting to grow with her. You know, I was the first one that was able to fly spray her, to hose her. It was really sad when I had to leave that job, but I took my last moment with her for what it was. She, like, when I say legit, licked my face and just about
Mm.
knocked me over in the pasture. Like, that let me know that whatever it was I was searching for between the both of us, it was there and it happened. And it didn't just happen by not doing nothing, you know, like we both had to work at it. And so
Yeah.
I've always been enthralled with horses, but I didn't grow up around them. You know, it really wasn't until I got into the special education field where I started volunteering at barns that had programs for
Mhm.
individuals with special needs. And so after the dolphin thing was over, you know, I didn't get my degree in marine science, so I'm not going to really land a job in that field. The next best thing was horses, and I
Yeah.
couldn't imagine a life otherwise. And so I've been at several barns over the past couple of years. Um, Me writing, them writing, building relationships, all of the above. And I actually did recently start my own program too for children and young adults with disabilities. But just being around horses, I don't have to speak. You know, we all know that they are very intuitive creatures. They know our energy and our intentions. And I've never been let down by any of the horses that I've interacted with. I could go in with no expectation at all just to sit in the pasture, and I'd be met and held in a way that I wasn't necessarily being met and held by the humans that I wanted to be
Mm.
met and held by, you know. Short version. I feel like I could
Oh,
like go on and on
of
about that.
course, absolutely. But there's that sense of felt safety
Hmm.
and that sense of voice without a voice. No,
Hmm.
let me rephrase that. Voice without having to use a voice.
Hmm.
Like that's go back to
Absolutely.
your sunsets and going back to your sunrises and going back to what we've spoken of. It's that's so interesting. So interesting. You've taken this whole voices thing to another, for me at least, just to another level, just to a whole other deep level that there's maybe some aspects for me that I hadn't even considered. So thank you for that. That's
I'm so glad.
that's amazing. Um, so how did you find, so let's just compare, we got lots of time here. How did compare the dolphins and the horses? I know I've spent a little meaning once, uh time in the water with dolphins. So
Hmm.
I had an interaction, but
Hmm.
dolphins versus or dolphins and horses, like what's what's the comparison there? Or is there a comparison there?
I think there is. To me, they are very, very similar. Dolphins are very curious, very intuitive. And if you think about not places like SeaWorld and,
Mhm.
you know, all the places that do like the trainings and shows, the place that I was at, it was a therapy-based facility solely. So they didn't do public interactions, public swims, anything like that. Yes, the dolphins were held captive, but not in a sense that kept them from being able to move freely. The canal that they were in was fed by like surrounding waters, and I'm not going to go and be a history or science buff and tell you what bodies of water those are, give
Yeah.
technical terms. However, most of those dolphins were born in captivity, and so it would be like inhumane to release them into the wild anyway if this program were to be not sustainable. But I have every bit of faith that it will be just because it's so impactful. But I think about like the animal trainers that were there. Yes, they train the animals with like positive reinforcements and stuff like that. Like the psychology between or behind working with dolphins and horses is very similar.
Mhm.
But I just know from what I've seen. So at my internship, there was one dolphin. She was a mama. Her name was Squirt. And I swear to you, I looked at her and in her eyes, I saw the same exact thing I saw in Pearl's eyes.
Really.
And also, while I was there, I was with Squirt and one of the clients for like a week long family session. And this particular student had like very low muscle tone and very like low range of motion, and so she truly couldn't extend her arm like we can. And I watched Squirt, if this is the girl's hand, I watched Squirt swim right up next to her and put her dorsal fin right under her hand and just swim away so gently. I just think that the nature of them, the curiosity, the gentleness, they are very large, and I think they're aware of their size because a pod of dolphins could easily go and take out a shark, but they don't really have ill intent or like meanings of harm towards us, as long as they feel safe, just as horses do and just as we do, it could make for a beautiful unfolding of a relationship or whatever you want it to be, but I think they're similar. I don't know if that's actually true.
No,
But
that's
just
like,
from my experiences with them, like the basics of the curiosity, the positive reinforcement training, the way that they respond to that, I think they're both very intelligent. The way that they have to work together. Dolphins, while you might see some swimming alone, they're kind of pod herd oriented too. So lots of just similarities and overlaps that
of course.
I've seen.
Yeah. I always think of the horses, there's a science that can explain and our energy, and they can feel our energy and heart rates and things like that. But there's a piece of magic that you just like explain how that dolphin knew to come up that close and just do it gently. Like there's there's a magic in it that it's just there. So interesting.
And it's not like that dolphin's on a leash and like you can guide her if she were to not land herself under that girl's hand, like mind blowing.
Yeah.
Mind blowing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And no words needed. Like again, going back to voice without needing voice.
That's true.
Oh, that's interesting. Wow. So if you had any pieces of wisdom for those that are listening, what might they be? If you were to like there's been so much in this and so much interesting things to think about. Like you've left us with so much. If you had just to bring it down into a few nuggets, what might you want to leave people with?
I would say it's okay to go inward. I think that's a big recurring theme in my life, and it could be for others as well. And as much as I want to say, don't be afraid to use your voice, don't be afraid to use it, whether it's fear of disappointment or not meeting someone's expectations. I think that is very minuscule in the grand scheme of things when it comes to us using our authentic voices, finding and using them. I think those might be like the only two that are like pressing.
Those are big ones.
Yeah.
And chase sunsets. Go and sit.
Yes. Go chase the light.
Get up early and go watch the sunrise.
Yes. At least once in your lifetime.
Absolutely. Even though I hate getting up early.
You won't regret it.
Exactly. That's beautiful. So you've talked about a program that you've got going. I'm just give you a few minutes. Like, what have you got going? What stuff that you're doing that you'd love to share with us?
Yes. So I guess one thing I should have prefaced this whole conversation with too, like when I was introducing myself, dream is my favorite word. And I think I've always been like a dreamer. Like I can be sitting like right now in my room and just thinking about all the possibilities that is out there in this world, not just for me, but for all of us. So with that being said, when I was thinking about starting my own program, it was perfect timing, but also unexpected. It was right when I was leaving the old barn job, which is kind of funny because in an instant where I felt like I didn't have a voice, well, now is my chance to go and create and find my own way of developing a program or, being of service to others. And so the name of the program is HERD, HERD, all caps, and it stands for Helping Everyone Reach Their Dreams. And my logic is, while I do work with individuals that don't have disabilities, ideally it is designed for those that do have disabilities, just because they are often forgotten about. When you're not working in the special education field or you don't have experience being around those that are different from us, it's easy to cast judgment. And I know it because I've seen it when I've gone out in the community with some of the clients that I serve. I've watched people look at me and look at them, you know, and I honestly don't want to know what's going through their head, because usually if it's something good, they speak up and say, "Oh, like, thank you for what you do," or they'll say hi to the individual that I'm with, you know? So ideally it was designed for them, and for them to come and have a space where they feel held and safe and loved and valued, and that they can be heard, whether it's audibly or not. Um, and so that's been really fun. I've only been up and running for a little over a year, so still kind of learning and exploring. That's not what I do full time, so it kind of is based around like my work schedule and life schedule. But it has flourished in ways that I didn't even think were possible. I never would have imagined myself having my own business. Um, it still feels crazy to say out loud. um, yeah, so that's that. And then again, not a big social media presence, but when COVID hit, I was living in Florida at the time. The school year was still active, so we went virtual, and teaching from home was awful. I much rather would have been in the classroom with my students, but I knew that it wasn't possible. So I couldn't get my kids to sit in the classroom. There was no way I was getting them to sit at a computer, given all their different needs and
Yeah.
stuff like that. So I made it a point, because I lived by myself. I really didn't have friends. I lived in the Keys. And while it was beautiful, there's just lots of retired military families, you know, everybody's married. It's, you know, just not an ideal area for someone my age. So I made it a point to go out at least once a day, whether it was for sunrise or sunset or both. And I just started taking pictures. And I was like, you know what? Everybody's trapped in their homes with or without people. So why not share it? So back in 2020, I started an Instagram and Facebook page. The names are similar, but I had to add in some numbers on Instagram, but it's Love at First Light. And I mean, the title says it all. Love at first light, you know?
Beautiful.
So yeah, I will make sure that I share all of
We will
those
share those for
details with
sure.
you.
Absolutely.
Yep.
I love that. Love at first light. That just explains it all.
hmm
It really says it all, doesn't it?
hmm
Wow.
It
Wow.
does.
Anything else? Excellent.
No, I can breathe now.
You did great. You did great. Um, thank you. And thank you for taking us maybe to places we haven't gone yet with this. I
Thank you for letting
appreciate
me.
that. It's food for thought for myself and for those listening. It's food for thought to really sit with that voices and that inward journey,
hmm
especially to the to honor that inward journey that we all have to take.
Yeah.
And sometimes share a voice without actually sharing our vocal voice,
hmm
and to look at it as voice as maybe a broader spectrum.
Yep.
Yeah. So thank you for opening our
You're
hearts
welcome.
and opening our minds. Really,
Thank you for receiving.
that's beautiful, and it has been so beautiful speaking with you today.
Thank you, Linda.
You did a good job. So we'll get a summary up in a day or so, and share those. We'll share those links to all the stuff you're doing. If you want to share the dolphin place, maybe if it's still going, people
Yeah,
can see what
absolutely.
that is all about, and
Of
anything else
course.
you think. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for listening. Thank you, Kim, for being here. And we're gonna have another one of these next week, so we'll have some information up soon, but we're gonna go right into another one next week, and I will share who that is in a bit. And for tonight, yeah, I'm just gonna sit inwardly tonight and just contemplate. And thank you for sharing. I
You're
I
most
appreciate
welcome.
your voice.
Thank you. Thank
You.
you.
All right. Take care, all.
Bye, everybody.